free and clear at this point.
For a moment. And we're coming up in 5. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I've got a fellow Minnesotan with me today. Guess who it is? Coleen Rowley, retired FBI agent, 9/11 whistleblower. I'm always so glad to have her, and so are you. What did you all say? She's off the chain? Yeah, that's it. Well, there's just so much that is happening. We do need people who will tell us the truth, people who really do understand the system. There's so much that's being revealed. We don't know what to believe, what not to believe. And so there are 1 or 2 people I trust who've been in the room. And you're one of those persons. I've got fingers left over. Trust and believe. But it's always a joy to have you on the show with us today. Of course, brilliant lawyer as well. Hey, Carol Soskin. Hey, Bernadette Telfair. And please do me a favor. Is it Telfair or Telfari? Just let me know. Just write it out for me. And everybody, please like and share. Help us with the algorithm. I need you to like and share and subscribe here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and then go to the Santita Jackson Show, Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That's the only place where I can get friends. I've got thousands of you holding on Santita Jackson, and I can't bring you over. They won't allow me to do it. So please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. And yes, I'm still on X at Santita J, and I'm on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. So let's get right to it. We've got McCarthyism on our college campuses. We have got a security breach that's got a lot of us concerned. Of course, a reporter, let me just start there. A reporter, Mr. Goldberg, who has a fine reputation. Of course, he and the president have been back and forth because he was the reporter who brought us the story about the president calling servicemen and women suckers, right? There was a context for it, but still painful to hear because these are people who are willing to give their lives and oftentimes lose their lives in service to the country or to the military industrial complex, what they're told. And then they come back disappointed, but maybe that's part of the story too here. But he did bring that story, and so the president has spoken disparagingly of him over the past 24 hours. But guess what? He was invited into a phone call, a secure phone call, and he was shocked to find that he was being told about a military action, a military attack that was 2 hours away. He said, how did I get in on this? And he held on to the information. And then he said, oh my goodness, 2 hours later, it happened. People are trying to figure out how he got on there. I mean, are we as secure as we think? Was this a security breach or something going on inside of the agency? Because this puts a lot of people who are very controversial, Coleen Rowley, on Front Street. This is not a good look for Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, who was quite a controversial pick. I don't know. You got to help me to understand how I'm supposed to read this.
Well, you were right to ask the question. The number one, I would say, burning question is, how did his email or telephone number, actually, I think it's through telephone number, get on the Signal chat? Now, Signal is an encrypted service that people use because they do want their conversations and their communications to be private. It's reported that the CIA actually allows its people to operate on Signal. And so Radcliffe, the CIA director, says, yeah, we're all allowed to be on Signal. If you remember back to the controversy with Hillary Clinton, she was communicating over unsecured avenues, and I have there's more about that I'll get to later about all this communication that needs to happen between officials, and yet they somehow have to all be secret. So it's actually mission impossible. But besides that, Signal is pretty private. And actually, even our national security agencies reportedly, I don't know if it's true or not, because I retired long before Signal existed, but it's reported that the national security agencies are allowed to say things on Signal. So the question is, how did, like you asked already, is how did Jeffrey Goldberg get on this Signal chat that was about an upcoming attack? Now, there are lots of aspects to this. It's not just black or white. You're going to hear agendas from the Democrats who are really trying to blow this out of proportion. This is a national security crisis, and all of the Trump administration needs to fall, according to the Democrats, who, by the way, have themselves gotten caught in not just Hillary Clinton, but Biden had documents in his garage and etc. So they've all had this problem, but they're jumping on it, they're pouncing on it. Understandably, they don't like Donald Trump, and for a lot of reasons, they're trying to use this national security lapse as a pretext, to again, I would say blow it out of proportion. And I'll get to why I think it's blown out of proportion. But here's the thing, with the question being, how did Jeffrey Goldberg, how did his communication get on there? Okay, and I don't think we're going to hear our mainstream press really ask or answer that. But you said he's hugely respected. Well, yes, he's the editor of The Atlantic, and The Atlantic is really our number one. It became maybe the most important neocon propaganda war hawk place to go. It's the go-to place to plant your weapons of mass destruction. Now they're planting. Iraq has nuclear weapons. And Jeffrey Goldberg, yes, he is. I mean, I put respected in quotes because, yes, you're going to see him on public television. He's very important. I would say that there's no doubt he's extremely important. But whether he should be respected is another story. Jeffrey Goldberg was an IDF. He's a dual Israeli-American national, a top neocon, and he actually worked in Israel as a prison guard. Well, obviously, his bias is for Israel. I mean, he was in the Israeli Defense Forces. Israel is the only country that does not have to register. If you're a lobbyist working under the for whatever, if you are a group like American Israeli Public Affairs Committee that is lobbying Congress, you don't have to register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. It's the only exception where dual nationals, and I can tell you this from personal experience, if you're trying to become an FBI agent, and you which by the way entails a top secret clearance, and sometimes even higher level, they call it compartmental clearances. So not just everyone gets the top secret clearance, and they do this extensive background investigation. Before I was allowed to become an FBI agent, I had been my junior year abroad in France. And so when I filled out this long application, I had to try to put all the places I lived in France, and the FBI had to check that I didn't have some kind of divided foreign loyalties because I had lived abroad for a year in college. Can you imagine what it would be like to say, no, I'm actually a citizen of a foreign country? And so you look at this divided loyalties of Jeffrey Goldberg. My guess, okay, just again, I'm speculating. I will admit it's speculation about how he just happened to find himself on a Signal chat with the National Security Advisor, the CIA Director, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Defense. And they're talking, really about an upcoming attack, a military attack. How did that just happen? Why wasn't I put on it? Why wasn't, if it was just a fluke of the telephone number getting mixed up, it could have been anybody. I'm going to venture an educated guess that he has been leaked to many, many, many times before this, because he is a media insider who will run with the war propaganda. And so, yes, it was inadvertent. They didn't deliberately put him on there, but inadvertently, because he's on other times and they have been in contact with him. Again, it's my guess. I'm guessing that's how he found himself listening into this. And now I'm just going to make a couple more points here in a more general way about the government secrecy. Daniel Ellsberg was asked this many times because they claimed that the Pentagon Papers was also top secret, classified. And of course, every whistleblower, including myself with the memo about 9/11, was classified afterwards. They used the pretext of a foreign security agency and crossed off blacked out two words: a security agency from a foreign country. And because of that, they classified 11 pages secret. So it even happened with me. And then they can say, well, you violated the Espionage Act. And, you're not a whistleblower, you're a leaker, you're a provocateur, you're a foreign agent, whatever, under the Espionage Act, you're a traitor, etc. So here's the situation. There's actually lawyers, national security type lawyers, who have written that this country is what they call a leaky Leviathan. A leaky Leviathan. So all this agenda you hear about national security is false. And Daniel Ellsberg will be, and many others like myself who have worked with classified documents. I was involved also with the Freedom of Information, trying to release and declassify things that didn't need to be classified. We see this now with the JFK files. After 60 years, they were still classified, even though I listened to Glenn Greenwald. There was nothing in those things that he was even remotely secret. And again, Daniel Ellsberg said 90% of everything that they claim national security, top secret, is nothing. It's nothing burger. Now, the one thing that, I think legitimately would need to be classified secret, at least for a short while, not for 60 years, but for a short while, is something like D-Day. So when there is an upcoming, and actually this does fit the situation of this chat, signal chat, because if there is an upcoming military attack or a bombing or something like that, again, it doesn't need to be classified for very long. But for that short term, before D-Day happens, before the Germans are well aware that, the Americans are landing on Normandy Beach, yes, that does have to be secret. And so there's this little bit of area that's secret. But then they use they use the classification to protect illegal acts, certainly embarrassing and unethical things. It's used all the time just to prevent embarrassment. But it's actually also used to prevent outright illegal actions by the government, which included all the Snowden revelations, etc. It includes the Pentagon Papers, things that they either lie about or that they actually are committing torture, all kinds of illegal things, and they're covered up through excessive secrecy. Now you get to the point about the leaky Leviathan. How does a Secretary of State communicate with the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor? They're not even in the same place, hardly ever going to be even in Washington, D.C. together. But would you imagine that every time they need an important conversation, they're going to have to go into a lead enclosed, they call it a skiff. These are little closets, and they're all covered with lead. And so if you want to be, remember mission, what was his name? That funny sitcom that we used to watch. And the bubble came down, the cone of secrecy.
Oh, was it Get Smart?
Get Smart, Maxwell Smart. Okay, so guess what? The cone of secrecy actually exists. It's a lead closet. It's called a skiff. And after 9/11, they built a lot more skiffs all over the country. So people could go in. Nobody could be hacked. Nobody could be intercepted. There's no ability to have a chat that's intercepted. Okay, but guess what? Nobody who has important information to convey and deliberate and discuss is even going to be, all of them, near a skiff to go into it. So for starters, it can't work. And they do need to communicate, or there's going to be cross signals all the time. You see this in administration. One official is asked something and he'll say one answer, and the other guy will say something else because they weren't even in communication with each other. So what happens, and this is why the signal was probably authorized. This is why it was authorized to begin with, because our so-called leaders, some of them are better leaders than others, but our leaders actually do need to be able to give each other information, important news information, and then discuss things. Okay, and they can't do this in a skiff. That's just impossible. So there has to be, and actually this is an excuse for Hillary Clinton operating on her phone and her emails and stuff. This is an excuse for it, because you know what? None of them said the truth. They can't function. Washington, D.C. cannot function without ways, the same ways that we communicate with our family and our friends. They have to have easier ways to communicate with each other than being in person and in one of these lead protected skiffs. Now, that should be said, that should be acknowledged. And then, yes, maybe encrypted communications are the answer. And then, this was sloppy. I will say the Democrats are right about something. This was sloppy on the part of Waltz, the National Security Advisor, I think, is the one they're kind of blaming for having allowed Goldberg on. And then, but it's sloppy, right? But then the question is, how did he find himself in this thing? And that should be asked. And guess what? I doubt we're going to even ask that, because he is talking to these people a lot when it serves their agenda to have him be exploited, just as, remember the New York Times woman that Scooter Libby and all the rest talked to
Miller?
Judy Miller. Okay, Jeffrey Goldberg is the new Judy Miller. And yes, she was given this misinformation about aluminum tubes. She put it on the front page of the New York Times so that the U.S. could go to war and kill 1 million Iraqis, because none of it was true. And Judy Miller was and Michael Gordon, he was the other one. There were two of them. And she did this more than once. I'm using the worst example that people know about. Jeffrey Goldberg, I would bet the house on it that he has been used many times before in the same way. And why? Because he serves Israel's interests. And right now, Israel's committing a genocide. And the bombing of Yemen is connected to the ongoing genocide. So who would be your editor of the Atlantic, who would best be able to try to manipulate public opinion in favor of bombing Yemen, in favor of ongoing genocide of Palestinians? Well, Jeffrey Goldberg. I mean, there's a long interview of Jeffrey Goldberg. Again, he's respected because he's good at his art. If you want to call a lot of it being propaganda, he's good at it, and he's risen up to the top. When Obama was at the end of his administration, who does he go to for the tell-all interview of my administration and why I was such a hero in trying to hold the line on Syria, blah, blah, blah? He goes to Jeffrey Goldberg.
Like people go to Bob Woodward.
I'm sorry, what?
Like Bob Woodward. Like,
Yeah, Bob, he's exactly right. A new Bob Woodward, exactly. And Bob Woodward, gets it's the same thing. He gets a lot of leaks, and this is the job of a journalist. A job of a journalist is to try to curry favor with government officials so that they can get the inside scoop. And I just, what Goldberg should be asked, and maybe you've seen it, but he should be asked this: how many prior times have you ever been on something that you had no business being on? Mm-hmm. And you know what? Even if he was asked, he's not going to answer truthfully. That is my opinion.
We're talking with Coleen Rowley, retired FBI agent, 911, 9/11 whistleblower, about how this really works, everybody. This is how the sausage is made. Because my question was, it was the question that you just put forth. Has he done this before? Of course he has. Is the Atlantic part of the Atlantic Council, this establishment group? And I think we underestimate, or many of us don't know, that inside of the Power Dome, if you will, since you want to give me Maxwell Smart, that people are fighting. I mean, there are real rivalries within the FBI, within the CIA, amongst the FBI and the CIA, and I mean, just on and on and on. And I wondered how much of this was that, because Pete Hegseth there is a faction that absolutely does not want him there. Right? I'm not taking up for him. I'm just trying to figure out what is going on. They had hearings this morning, Coleen Rowley. I said, okay, this is a breach, but how they didn't call me. Well, yeah. They wouldn't call me, but you know what I mean. So I don't understand what this is. I mean, should we be concerned? Does something like this indicate that we are less secure than we think?
Well, yes and no. Honestly, in a very pragmatic manner, I don't think Jeffrey Goldberg, having prior knowledge of a site that Yemen is going to be bombed, had any potential for being an actual breach of security. For starters, he's sympathetic to the bomb. He's more than sympathetic. He's a driver of the bombing of Yemen. So, and actually he didn't even believe it when he saw it. When he first saw it, apparently he thought it was a hoax or a joke, and he didn't realize it was true until after it happened. So I don't breach of security here, but yes, they should try to fix this. And thinking about how you could accidentally put someone on a Signal chat, it possibly could have been their so-called secretaries or assistants who set up the chat. Yeah. Normally, some of these chats, at least I'm on one chat. I'm on one Signal group, which was when we went to Turkey to try to have a humanitarian flotilla to Gaza over a year ago. How many of us? 150 countries. We all were in Istanbul. We were trying to get a ship to sail with 5,000 tons of humanitarian food, supplies, etc. for Gaza. Yeah, and we came up with a Signal chat. And people are pretty careful on this Signal chat. They change their names. I'm Coleen Rowley everywhere I go, but a lot of people are worried and they change their names and stuff, even on the Signal. But that's setting up of something like this would not have been Pete Hegseth or Rubio. It would probably have been someone working for them that did it. And if Trump is looking for a scapegoat, that's who they will probably land on. I mean, they'll say, well, yeah, you should have reviewed it or something. Maybe if it was Waltz that it was his secretary or something, they said, well, it's your fault because you should have reviewed who was on this. And maybe they did. Maybe one of them did it themselves. I don't know. But a lot of times I just know my bosses didn't do any of the legwork. They didn't do that type of thing. They had people helping them that did all of the the setting up of the chat. Yeah, and that should be fixed. It definitely should be. I think the real fix would be that they should, everybody says they're against leaking to the media. Well, if there are top level people like your secretaries and your officials who are in close contact with a media person, that they should be looked into just as much as the lower ranking people. Mm-hmm. They never look into the top ranking people. They kind of consider, they're off limits. Mm-hmm. With whistleblowers, we were all, and anytime you see a top official claiming to be a whistleblower, I said, no, that's kind of odd, because they're the ones in power. They don't have to be a whistleblower and say, the public needs to know this. They can go out and actually tell the world. They're allowed to. The president isn't bound by classification. He can go and tell the world. So for him to say, I'm a whistleblower, this happened with, I'm not going to go into examples, but it's happened before where high level people will claim to be whistleblowers. And, they should not, probably any contact they have with the media should be looked at. Yes, there are times that you need to talk to the media, but when you really curry favor and these close personal relationships, that therein lies potential national security. And I will tell you, if you're leaking false information to start new wars and making things up, and your best buddy is the editor of a major paper or a TV station, that is the national security lapse. And again, it's not even true information. It's false information, like the weapons of mass destruction and what's going on now with claiming Iran has a nuclear weapon. And so they're trying to come up with a pretext whereby the U.S. and or Israel will be allowed to bomb Iran under this pretext that they have developed a nuclear weapon. Well, guess what? I think it's on all fours with the Iraq WMD. It's a complete lie. And so if you were, let's say that you were the new Judy Miller or whatever, and you ran with that now because your close official, your Pete Hegseth or your Marco Rubio told you this, and you said, well, I've got this great source that Iran has a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And you run with it. You know what? That is a bigger national security problem for the United States, because this is all going to be horrible situation leading to potentially to World War III based on a lie, just as earlier things have been. And you know what? The editor can say, well, you know what? That wasn't true information. That's not information that's covered by the Espionage Act because it's false information. And so they're allowed to put out false information. It's just something that's, an actual documentary, classified information that's true. And so there's a lot of aspects to this thing. And all the parties involved are making hay out of it. And they're making hay for their own purposes as opposed to really getting to the root problem. And the root problem is the use of propaganda, making up pretexts and these cozy relationships whereby the media now has become part of the military, industrial, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex. And it's about control of public opinion. And that Mickey.
I'm not interrupting you. I mean, there's no question about it. But, just even when you brought up Mr. Goldberg's background, how important do you think it is for us to know their background? Like that Bob Woodward comes out of naval intelligence, right? So he was not an unknown entity in the White House. He's someone who's deep in. I mean, these people are very much, the establishment is appropriately named. Everybody goes to the same schools. They come through the same portals, and they end up in the same spaces working. And they protect each other.
there are some couple of FBI agents, that one guy Figliusi, and there's another one, and they became talking heads on national news, on TV news. There's Brennan, who became a big talking head with Rachel Maddow on a TV, on a what do you call it? Not TV, but the CNN and the
MSNBC.
Yeah, MSNBC, right. So they are known, their backgrounds are known, and I can't believe that, for instance, having been CIA director, who was torturing and killing and involved in drone assassination, all those things that Brennan did, that many liberals thought every word out of his mouth is golden. He's telling us the gold standard for truth, after this guy has lived a lifetime of lying and killing and horrible. But yet, okay, it's good people at least know he was the CIA director. Now, there are some that are not known, and I will give credit. There's only a couple of outlets that tell you what. Ellen McLeod is a reporter, and he's gone into depth about how many former FBI, CIA are involved in all of the social media officialdom. So the people that are controlling Twitter and Facebook and a lot of the other social media are actually former FBI, CIA, etc. They hired the top level people. I will give credit to these couple of these reporters who are doing the hard work of looking into backgrounds. And so, for instance, Goldberg, I don't think very many people. I mean, you could question, how will the nightly news, when they go into this tonight and try to onto the story, will they say anything about the background of Jeffrey Goldberg as having been an IDF prison guard, being an Israeli-American dual national? I really doubt they will. So, yeah, because they don't want people to think, well, he's got a pretty significant agenda. Public PBS, who has him all the time as their news person, Jeffrey Goldberg, they treat him with the utmost respect, and they don't question a word out of his mouth. Like every word out of his mouth is the complete truth and nothing but the truth. And, I think that they should, a lot of times there's a financial conflict of interest. If you're a judge, for instance, you're supposed to recuse yourself if you have a financial conflict of interest in a case. And if you're a witness, they're supposed to find out if you have a conflict of interest, so that at least the jury knows about that conflict of interest. But we never, as a media consumers, we hardly ever know about the backgrounds and the conflicted loyalties, to say the least, of the talking heads.
Well, why is it important that we understand, when you talked about a dual national? Because in times past, that would have got you, labeled as anti-Semitic. And you're saying, no, it's important for us to know that he's a dual national. Why? I mean, because the mayor of Chicago, got his finger cut because he was serving with the IDF, which means he's a dual national. Yeah.
Yeah, there were times in the past, again, Israel is the exception, for starter. It is the exception. There were times in the past that you would not have been able to, different nationalities have been not trusted. And, again, it's something if you're joining the FBI or the CIA, at the very least, you're going to get polygraphed. When I spent the year in France, when I was 20 years old, I didn't have to get a polygraph then, because normally now I think they do. Actually, anybody who is traveling abroad and stuff, they get polygraphed. But the polygraphs are not foolproof. And so, yeah, there's a reason for this, is because right now, if Israel was Lithuania, or I'm trying to think of another better example, if it was Madagascar, if we had a dual Madagascar,
no, Russia, go there.
Yeah, no, if we have a dual Russian American, you know what? They're gonna, and they come out and say, oh, Putin is a smart fellow and he's a good negotiator, whatever. Yeah, guess what? They're going to be calling them all kinds of names. But Israel is the exception. And right now we're involved up to our eyeballs with Israel in the worst war crimes, the worst deceitful wars in the Mideast and war crimes. And it's tearing. It's really bad. It's really hurting. Even Israel is the, what they're doing is actually hurting their own security interests as well as the United States. And so, yeah, these things should be known before we trust somebody's information on the news as golden. Yesterday, we were, this ties in a little bit with the academic freedom issue that has been last couple of weeks, because Trump is good for him. He's honest about it. He says, I am going to go after the faculty and students, not only of Columbia and Harvard and the big schools out east who are sympathetic. They seem too sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And I'm going to either deport some of their foreign students or their green card students. I think the next step is actually even going after Americans, which they're allowed to do under the National Defense Authorization Act. They can do that. Well, back in 2012, Obama passed a law under the National Defense Authorization Act. And everybody knows that the NDDA is automatically passed because it's funding war. So no congressperson can ever vote against the National Defense Authorization Acts. And they come up every so often to fund the military and the wars. And in 2012, Obama slipped in to the NDDA that any American, even including journalists, can be arrested if the administration labels them as terrorists or traitor or whatever. I think they don't even have to go that far as being traitor, just antithetical to our U.S. interests. So if they get labeled as being saying something counter to an administration under the NDAA, they can be arrested without any probable cause, without habeas corpus, without due process. Now, this seemed way back in 2012, everybody was like, what? This is completely unconstitutional. And Chris Hedges and Daniel Ellsberg and some other reporters took this case all the way up to the Supreme Court. And at one point they said, you mean Chris Hedges, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, could be detained under this law? And the Supreme Court said, yes, you can be. So that law has never been modified. It's on the books. And yeah, it's as bad as the 1800 one that the alien, what's it called? The Alien Extradition Act and whatever. These the Espionage Act is from 1917. These old laws that arose and emerged during a time of war. They emerged for a reason in a time of war to allow what John Yoo, our favorite Department of Justice attorney for George Bush Jr., who started to write after 9/11, 2 weeks after 9/11, he wrote a series of torture memos. And in those memos, I tried to read a couple of them, and they're ungodly, horrific to read. He wrote basically the sum of it was, in a time of war, the executive branch under Article 2, executive commander-in-chief powers can initiate things like martial law. And martial law means that the Constitution no longer is all important. Martial law means, and he wrote a First Amendment. He actually, that's part of it that I read one time. And again, this is like 2-3 weeks after 9/11. There's a memo 2-3 weeks after 9/11 that says, now that George Bush has declared war on terror, he has the power to subvert the First Amendment. That's in a Department of Justice, Office of Legal Counsel memo that John Yoo and this other guy, Delahunty, co-authored. And there was a whole bunch of them like that. Now, John Yoo came to Minnesota. People might remember, if they're happened to be listening in Minnesota, he spoke in 2009 or something like that, 2011. I can't quite remember, but it's been a long time ago. It's been over 10 years ago, 11 years ago. He spoke at the law school, St. Thomas Law School. And the title of his speech was, War Presidents Have Imperial Presidency. He called it the Imperial Presidency Powers. And he says, well, our best presidents in history, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, I don't remember what else he said, whatever. They were our best presidents because they took all power to themselves, including even overriding the Constitution. He gave a talk like that at our law school. And I was sitting in the front row. I was sitting in the front row of the talk. And at some point he says it's based on emergency power, because when you're in an emergency, as in war, you have to make quick decisions. You know, they have all this argument about why the president can't be boggled down by law. They can't be bothered by following law because they have to make quick decisions. It's an emergency. And so I raised my hand and I said, well, you know what? It's already been 9 years since 9/11. Hasn't the emergency over by now? And he goes, well, it's not over yet, but it will be shortly. He said that. And so as he was walking out of the building, I was like following behind him. And I said, okay, we're going to have a bet. When is the emergency over? And I bet him a hamburger or something, because I knew that this would never be ended, that they would just springboard from one war to the other so that they could always say, we don't have to follow the law. And like when I was saying yesterday, is we were at the University of Minnesota, because now all the university boards of directors are being threatened that they will lose all their funding. Trump has threatened not only to deport students, fire faculty. They fired university presidents and other teachers. But besides that, and they're trying to deport students. And like I said, they can actually detain Americans. But besides that, they're going to the bosses of the universities, the presidents, the boards of directors, and they're saying, we're taking all your federal funding. And when they did that with Columbia, and they threatened to take, I think, $400 million away, they caved. And they caved and they said, okay, you come in, you can oversee all of our academic, our curriculum, everything. And of course, you can't say that, you know, when the neocon genocide enablers come in, you're not going to be able to stand up with my sign that says "Stop the Genocide." If you hold a sign up, "Stop the Genocide," when at Columbia, and you have the Pete Hegseths and the Marco Rubios now overseeing academia, guess what? You're not going to be, no academic freedom is going to exist. So anyway, the funny thing was yesterday we were in a big plaza in front of the Northrop Auditorium, which is a big area in front of the University of Minnesota. And I just happened to look, and I had my banner, "Stop the Genocide." And I had another sign that said, the other sign said, "Genocide kills academic freedom." So I had signs that said, "Genocide kills academic freedom." And I looked up, and in front of me on the top of this big auditorium, chiseled in stone, and I can't recite it, but it says, we found this institution to because of man's noble pursuit of understanding and truth. and it's one of these things that, you know, it sounds really good. The noble pursuit of education and understanding and truth. And I thought to myself, and you're saying the noble understanding of truth and education. And now, if you say murder and genocide is wrong, you're going to be censored and deported, and you're going to be fired. I mean, the hypocrisy was almost too much to bear. When I looked up and read that sign, I could hardly even. And I said, "Well, you know what? The Northrop Auditorium is on our side. The motto is on our side here." But I mean, these people, they're under pressure. I mean, I suppose you have to sympathize with them, but they really they have to stand up to it at this point, because this is the worst situation we could be in terms of allowing genocide and funding and arming genocide. The whole world, we're the only ones. United States, we can't say this here. The rest of the world can look at this and say, "Oh my God, what in the heck? What how have you lost your rockers? Have you lost your minds?" I mean, you know, this is like incredible that we're doing what we're doing.
But talking with Coleen Rowley, retired FBI agent, 9/11 whistleblower. We only have, I can talk to you forever, but several people have said you are their favorite person. I understand, because I mean, I tell you, I love listening to you because I think that you're obedient to principle and not party. In fact, we're going to be talking about that in the next hour, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all subject to everything. That is to say, when I look at I saw a video on Instagram just before I came on the air, and this young woman was talking about rage bait, and she said, "Do you know why many Black people feel that ultimately we're being pushed into martial law?" I mean, Ms. Rowley, they're taking everything from everybody. Mm-hmm. Your Social Security, people are missing checks now. They're going to unplug Medicaid, Medicare. They're reducing people. And I'm worried, I'm very concerned that this is pushing people against the wall. I hear the rage. And more than that, I hear the betrayal and the desperation. And it's growing. And I'm wondering where that rage will go. I've got about 6 or 7 minutes. You can have them. Because the sweep of history, I'm just trying to figure out, with these laws that they've snuck onto the books, we don't know about them. We're watching people being deported. We're watching people being disappeared. At least we think Mahmoud Khalil is still in the United States. They told us he's in Louisiana. I haven't seen him. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, we talked about Homan Square this morning in Chicago. That's more than 10, 15, 20 years old. That is a Black site in Chicago that was modeled on CIA Black sites from the local police. And then on our college campuses, they want to collect, the government, the feds want to pick up names of the demonstrators. What does all of this mean?
Well, you know, here's the best we can hope for. And I will admit, I will definitely make it clear, I did not vote for Trump. I did not imbibe too much hopium. After I voted for Obama the first time, I kind of learned my lesson after that. And
what made you learn your lesson after that? What happened?
Because he immediately, he had promised, as Bush Jr. too. Bush Jr. had promised that he would not go to war. Bush Jr. said, no, you know, we should just do good things for the United States and not be, you know, running around the world starting wars. He said that, he promised that before he was elected. Yeah. Of course, he immediately started a series of wars, George Bush. Obama promised the same thing. Everybody had, I was hardly the only one. We all had a lot of hope that he would close Guantanamo and reverse all of that John Yoo legal stuff and whatever, that he would never pass a detention of Americans, never pass the law that allows propaganda on Americans. That was passed under Obama. And he immediately increased the Afghanistan war. Instead of bringing the Afghanistan war to an end, which I thought he had promised, many people did. No, within months, he got the Nobel Peace Prize. He got the Nobel Peace Prize because he promised to end wars. And then he immediately surged in Afghanistan. And, in 2009. And that was it. I said, I'm not voting for him in 2012. And I did it. So when Trump comes along and promises to end the war in Ukraine, yes, not just me, but some of the other veteran intelligence professionals, Ray McGovern and others. Yes, it's possible to cross your fingers and say, we hope that he keeps his promise. That's definitely possible. But really, logically, to have too much pragmatic hope in that's going to happen after we've seen all of the corruption and what happens to people in Washington, D.C. with the military industrial complex and whatever. So I did not vote for Trump either time. And so I'm not one of these people who got fooled. But I would say the best that we can hope is the people who actually did naively fall for Trump's promises, unless he carries out any of these promises. And I think he should end not only the Ukraine war, he should tell Israel to stop the genocide, because that thing is now starting to turn into third world war with Iran. And so there's a lot of things he could do, but if he does not do any of these, I would hope that the average hardworking person who might have believed those promises and might be a social conservative and might have believed those promises would at this point have buyer's remorse. And that's the best thing that can happen, because if the polls start to show the buyer's remorse and some of these congresspersons realize their constituents in town halls here in Minnesota, we can't have town halls. Walz just tried to have his first town hall, but he didn't have it in the Twin Cities. He had it way in downstate in Rochester. But at town halls, if your congressperson does hold a public forum anymore, ours don't. They're too scared to hold public forums. But if you do, they hear from the people who voted for them, who tell them, hey, this has to end. We can't be murdering children, thousands and even hundreds of thousands of women and children, and, setting off another war, trying to whatever. I don't care what Pete Hegseth thinks it's a crusade or whatever. We can't be doing this. These are good people. So I think that's the best that can happen, is that some of the people, obviously the Democrats, are already going full, like Bernie Sanders and the rest are going. And in some ways, they're not even addressing the wars in foreign policy. They're skipping over that to some of the more domestic issues, which I would sympathize. I certainly sympathize with some of the cuts to government that have happened because they weren't careful. It's fine to find fraud. I agree with finding fraud, but they weren't very careful. So I would agree with that legitimate criticism. But Sanders needs to get on the bandwagon here on the foreign policy and war as well. And I think maybe that would be the best thing that could happen right now. The worst thing that can happen is that the country now is so destabilized with people, the thousands of government workers that have lost their jobs, and the people whose welfare, their Meals on Wheels, and their Social Security, on and on and on. And when that happens, and you become desperate and depressed, and many people have the loaded guns at home, and they're going to fall into this thinking, like many of the mass killers. I just wrote an article about the mass killing that the United States authorizes throughout the world is seen as an example for people who now are very depressed, and they think that, I have a gun too, and I'm just going to go shoot the concert, or and now you don't even need a gun. You just need your car. Go drive into a crowded public venue with a car and see that as their answer. And you know what? We're off the charts. We're off the charts in mass killing violence in the United States right now. No country has it as bad. Europe is starting to get some, but nobody has it like it is here. And I think it's because we're subjected to violence, recruitment through violent video games. Even little kids grow up because of our military posture in the world. I think that's a lot of it. I just wrote an article for the Women Against Military Madness about this. That's the worst outcome, is that we're going to see more people, and by the way, even under what I forget what Obama, I think it was, we have had mass killers of all political stripes. Somebody shot Trump, and I don't think it was a Republican who shot Trump. Somebody shot that baseball game where a bunch of Republican congressmen got wounded. So it's not just all coming from right or left or whatever. It's because our country cannot solve its problems right now without thinking that war is the answer. And so what do you expect private individuals to do? They see the same thing. I lost my girlfriend, broke up with me. I got a D on my test. I lost my job. My family threw me out. All kinds of personal sadness, all kinds, and it could increase. There's all kinds of reasons that people have problems, but here's the difference. Now we see the answer as killing people. We see the answer. Okay, if I don't have a loaded gun, I'll just go rent a truck. I'm so mad, I'll just go rent a truck and I'll drive into the next parade or something. It's happened and how do you stop that? I'll tell you what, FBI, I don't care, Secret Service, they can't stop these things. What we need is a better culture in this country that says, no, violence is not the answer. The Quakers used to, I have a bumper sticker. I've had it on it's the Quaker bumper sticker. It says, war is not the answer. And that's, everybody needs to put that on their bumper. War is not the answer because it's turning us even domestically into monsters. And people say civil war, constitutional crisis, civil war, something in the middle, but there's some bad outcomes that are lying in the future unless we can somehow get to the root of the problem here.
And we can. I cannot wait to have you back, Coleen Rowley. You have got everybody so engaged, so hyped up. And I think it's a good thing because what you're doing is helping us to think. And you're giving us so much great information. I cannot wait to have you back, Coleen Rowley, because we're watching everything and it can be so confusing, but honestly, now I actually feel better. I feel better. I feel better. And Solomon, I am up. I'm just looking like shit. Because this is a lot to take in because I'm just paranoid enough to wonder what was that really about. I literally have 1 minute. Coleen Rowley, what do you want?
I just want to thank you. There are some good voices out there trying to counter some of this mess we're in, and you're one of them. And there are a few others. If you people are listening and want to go to my Facebook and look up my Stop the Genocide banner floating right under the Northrop Auditorium's tribute to education and truth and justice, etc. Please have at it, because this helps people understand. It's easy for us to fall for the leaders. It really is easy. It's a social psychology experiment that unfortunately it's true experiment that worked. They can get a lot of people to follow the leader. And thank you for trying to get people to think and make up their own minds about some of this stuff.
Well, you're a personal hero of mine, and I thank you for all that you've done, for all that you do. I thank you. We all thank you. We are in your debt. You make me proud to be an American. You make me proud to be a woman, proud to be human. May God bless you.
Yep. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Coleen Rowley, everybody, the great one. Let's talk about parties in the next hour. I say we have no permanent friends. We have no permanent enemies. We just have permanent interests. That came from Congressman Bill Clay from Missouri. Well, now I say no permanent parties, just permanent interests. Let's talk about that in the next hour. actually in a few minutes, right here on the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.